So this is one of the garlic woods that I used to come to in the past before I planted the 3,000 bulbs back at home, and as you can see it is absolutely littered with wild garlic. I just thought I'd come here because I wanted to do a lacto-ferment and I didn't want to harvest too much from the field as it gets established. And I wanted to come and check this out because there is a lake nearby, but sadly all the bulrushes, all the cattail, reed mace, it's all been flattened either by wind or someone's cut it back, so there's no fluff. I want some more fluff for making flour, but this is such a beautiful little pocket out here in Northamptonshire, and this is a really nice go-to for the wild garlic. And but it did make me sad on coming here because I haven't been for a while, and as I was driving through the country roads, the housing estate has swallowed up more farmland, and it's really sad to see that. We're losing land on a remarkable scale, and whenever I go out driving I'm quite sad to always kind of see that kind of industrialization of habitats that shouldn't be destroyed. What we're going to do when suddenly we're out of enough farmland to even sustain ourselves. We can't rely on constant imports and things like that. So yeah, it does make me sad when I see that happen. But yeah, I'm going to gather some wild garlic here, and I'm going to go back and make some lacto-fermented wild garlic. What we're making is lacto-fermented wild garlic. Now this is a very easy way to preserve wild garlic. All you need is your wild garlic, and you just need salt. So in order to prepare lacto-fermented wild garlic, you just need 2% of the salt to the weight of the wild garlic. So this was about 1.2 kilos, and I added about 25 grams of salt, I think it was. So you just add the salt, and you put a little layer of wild garlic leaves down, sprinkle a little bit of salt on, get a pounding tool and start pounding it in. And then you put another layer of wild garlic in once you pound that down. Do the same, sprinkle a layer of salt, and keep pounding everything down until you end up with, I don't know if you can see, it's starting to get some liquid in there. And you just got to keep pounding and pounding and pounding until the liquid is more than the wild garlic leaves. And then you just push that into a jar, submerge the garlic leaves under their own liquid, and you leave that in a room temperature place to ferment for about 2 weeks. Now lacto-fermenting is one of the easiest ways to preserve vegetables. We do it with cabbage, like making your sauerkraut, and that's one of the most well-known ways that lactobacillus has been used to ferment vegetables. And you can do this with different things, kimchi for example, and that's also lacto-fermented. And so wild garlic is a similar process. Once you've got it pulverized down into, it's just submerged under its own liquids, nothing can really go wrong because you need an oxygen rich environment for the molds to form. Lacto-fermentation is an amazing way to preserve flavor and texture. If you've ever tried sauerkraut, it changes the texture and the flavor of the cabbage to something that is really quite delicious. And the same happens with wild garlic. Now if you're new to preserving foods, lacto-fermentation is a really easy way to get into this, because if something did go wrong, you'd know it. There'd be a mold, it'd smell funny. It's really easy to kind of get into. Now you do have to be careful of things like botulism, but as long as you follow the procedure with the salt ratio, with the submerging under the liquid, you should be okay. Right, nice little shelter that somebody built out here in the woods. Now so day 6 and day 7, they went quite well actually. I did the usual, had my acorn porridge and things like that, but in the evening I got very, 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 very lucky, and I caught myself a pigeon. So so I had the meat, I fried that up, and I had a dish with a salad of wild garlic, garlic mustard, and what was the other thing that I put on there? I forgot, but I also had some Scarlet Health cups in there. Now I also made an interesting thing out of cauliflower fungus ground into a powder and wild garlic. I blitzed the wild garlic, boiled it up with the cauliflower fungus, and it was almost like a hummus in texture and flavour. It was quite nice, and that went well with the pigeon. Now on day 7, however, I was craving something Japanese, Asian style. I do love my sashimi and sushi, and that's one thing that I'm going to miss on this 100% wild food diet. So I got very, very, very lucky, and I got another pigeon. So I cut the breast meat off of that. Now pigeon breast, when it's raw or rare cooked, it's a very, very, very delicate, slightly sweet flavour. I actually prefer it that way. So I sliced thin pieces of raw pigeon breast and put that on a little salad of on a little bed of bitter cress and wild garlic. I drizzled it with blackberry vinegar and some birch sap syrup. Now those flavours, the bitter cress kind of gives it a mild wasabi mustard kind of flavour, and the wild garlic gives that nice little kick that the ginger that you normally have with sushi, etc., would have given. And the sweetness from the blackberry vinegar and the birch sap syrup brought it all together, and that was the most delicious dish I had for the past 7 days. Pigeon sashimi is absolutely gorgeous, and you can see by the video how delicious it actually came out. In the Western world, we're kind of very scared or adverse to trying that. Now we do have dishes like venison tartare, or we do eat sashimi, raw salmon, or raw tuna. So it's not unheard of that we eat raw meat. Now as long as it comes from a good source and the animal is healthy, I don't see a problem in it, and in fact I prefer it that way for the most part. On Monday, on the 27th, the 7th day, I did wake up a little bit lackluster for energy. I think it was because I've been so active the past week, and I've been eating very little, and I'm just a little bit lackluster for energy, a tiny bit dizzy. But what I actually ended up craving was some artist conch tea. So artist conch is related to reishi, and reishi has been extensively researched in terms of its medicinal qualities. You can Google it all, you can look for studies, and it's thought that artist conch has similar properties, but it hasn't been studied to that kind of extent. So but it is a very common bracket fungus that is in the UK, so you'll find it more than you'll find reishi growing wild. And so I've harvested a lot of that in 2020, and I dried it down and ground it into a powder. So I made a tea with that. I added a tablespoon of lion's mane just to help clear the mind, and same with a teaspoon of fly agaric. And I also added a little bit of common hogweed seed and boiled that up with a bit of stream water, and that was absolutely just what I needed. Like, it just gave me the nice little pickup that I needed. And I added 3 tablespoons of birch sap syrup in there, and I was a bit generous with that, and I added a teaspoon of badger fat just to give me the fats and the sugars with the tea. And then the rest of the tea I drank during the course of the day, just giving me some little pick-me-ups. And then I had my acorn porridge for kind of like between lunch and dinner. And then when I found that pigeon and made the sashimi, that just woke my body back up again. That is just what I needed, and it was absolutely delicious. I cannot forget that flavour, and I'd love to recreate it. I also put some protective netting over some Alexanders that I've got. I noticed that where I spread certain seeds, I remembered a few locations, the rabbits have been trying to get in there and dig out the the roots and the young shoots of the Alexanders. So I've put some protective netting over a few places on the 27th, and I also planted some wild strawberries. And so that's something I've always wanted to kind of expand on, is the wild strawberries. And there's a little bit of stony area at the back of the house, and so I planted about 20 plants in there. They're tiny little things, but hopefully they'll take and they'll start to spread. Now there is a wild strawberry patch further up along the old railway line, which is just all wooded now. The railway hasn't been there for about over 100 years or so, and there is a bunch of wild strawberries up there, but it's very overgrown, it's shaded, so there's not a huge amount of fruit when it comes to the season for those. So I've never really harvested much from that area, so I've planted some in full sunlight, and I'm hoping that will give me some yields in the years to come. Now I've also been contemplating about these wild calories. I did a little bit of research on acorn flour and the calories that it has, and I did a few number crunching, did a little bit of number crunching, and it turns out that the amount of acorn porridge that I have been eating is providing me about 700 calories. That's including the badger fat that I put in there and any little additions. And the pemmican is about 140 calories per small 25 gram squares that I've cut them into. So if I had 2 of those, that's nearly 300 calories extra. So that's already 1,000 calories just from those 2 things, plus the broth. So I reckon I could hit about 1,300 to 1,500 calories in a day, which is actually not too bad considering I'm eating only wild food. And I haven't been feeling so bad. I haven't been losing weight like crazy. I've only lost 1 kilo, which is probably water weight mostly, in the last 7 days. And also it's that time of year where I start shedding winter fat, so it's all part of that whole process that is coming into spring. So it's so I do wonder whether the 2,000 calories that I'm supposed to be eating on the diets that they recommend that we should have 2,000 calories, but I'm beginning to wonder whether that's actually the case, especially when you're on wild food, because you've got a higher nutrient density with wild food, and it's giving your body more nourishment in smaller portions. So I wonder whether the same thing applies when it comes to wild food. And when you think about that, you suddenly start thinking about, wow, okay, we're planting farmlands with intensive agriculture, we're sort of depleted soils, not as much nutrition going into these plants and vegetables. Now when you start thinking about these intensive agricultural practices, and then you look at wild food, and things like nettles, for example, they are packed with protein, much more than you would get with spinach, and a bunch of other minerals and vitamins that is just insane in quantity compared to cultivated plants. So doesn't it make more sense to focus on wild habitats, on restoring wild habitats? If you've got a whole patch of nettles that you don't have to worry about trying to farm, that has so much nutrition, isn't that a better solution than the intensively nutritionally depleted produce that we have in the supermarket? For me, there just isn't even a comparison. Wild food always trumps on the nutrition front. So overall, I'm actually feeling pretty amazing. It's day 8 now, I think. Let me check. Yeah, it's day 8 of the Wild Food Microbiome Project, and I'm feeling much more alive, I'm feeling much more energy, and I think after having a bit more of a peaceful day today, it was raining most of today, so I took things a bit slower, I had a bit more rest, and I feel recuperated, I feel great. This is actually turning into a rather pleasurable, enjoyable experience, and it's making me aware that I can actually live off the wild. I've thought about it many times, and I knew I had the skills to live that way, but I just hadn't through the convenience of modern living. And being put into this situation where we have to do it as part of the challenge, it's just made me realise how in tune, how in balance, and how good I feel just eating only raw food. And the other foragers on this experience have also expressed that same thing. They've all felt amazing. They've all felt amazing on this diet. But that's all for me for now, and I will see you in the next video.